I'm a professional gerontologist, and I've also been working with people with dementia for over 20 years. So you would think that would make me the perfect caregiver for my dad when he was diagnosed with dementia. Well, that wasn't necessarily the case, and I'm not afraid to admit it. Well, maybe just a little. You see, I approached my dad's dementia with the way I was taught, with my research in hand and the list of all the things you should do when caring for somebody with this disease. And that is way less complicated when you don't call your patient dad and you haven't known him your whole life. And there are so many of us who are caring for our mothers, our fathers, our sisters and brothers, and husbands and wives who have this debilitating disease. So you want to hear how it went at our house? When my dad was in the thick of it, he wouldn't stop calling me while I was at work. And he wasn't calling me once a day to give me a cute dad report or to hear the sound of my voice. By the way, he never did that. He was blowing up my cell phone until I answered. And trust me, it wasn't an emergency. If the house was burning down, my mom would have called. My dad was calling because he was upset that someone had taken the remote control for the TV, or he was mad at me because I didn't give him the paperwork that I'd promised, which I had, or he had locked himself out of his computer again. It was just an endless list of troubles that he wanted me and only me to fix right now while I was at work. At first, I would just hang up the phone. I know. Not the best reaction, but you have to understand that when I was a kid, we weren't allowed to call him at work. So this new role reversal was extremely frustrating. Then I would start challenging him with all these questions. What time is it, Dad? What day is it, Dad? Where are you, Dad? You see, I knew he couldn't answer those questions. Dementia had robbed him of those answers. But I still wanted him to be aware that it was the middle of the workday and not an appropriate time to call me. But that was my reality, not his. And I wanted him to be there with me too. But it was just too stressful for the both of us. When caring for somebody with dementia, it's our natural tendency to want to bring them back to our world. We do this to make ourselves more comfortable and to remove anxiety. But it just causes more stress and confusion for the person with dementia. And it doesn't work in the long run because there's no cure for dementia and no one just snaps out of it. Another approach for dealing with somebody with dementia is to meet them where they are or pretend that their world is real. This clinical technique is called therapeutic fibbing. And let me tell you, it's really hard to do when you're a caregiver who's on call 24/7. There was a period of time when my dad thought I was his younger sister, Wendy, who is 5'2", blonde, and 67 years old. And it really caught me off guard. When I'd walk into the room, my dad would look up from his chair and say, "Wendy, it's so good to see you. When did you get here?" Playing along just created more confusion, disappointment, and a lot of frustration for me. Keeping up the role-playing just wasn't going to work. You see, dementia is a marathon, not a sprint. That's why it's referred to as the long goodbye. It was just going to be too exhausting for both of us to keep up this story in his head. Living in a pretend world is especially difficult when you're a family caregiver, because being inauthentic adds a lot of extra stress, on top of everything else you need to worry about, the falling, the incontinence, the wandering, and sometimes even violent outbursts. Many of the recommended strategies for families to deal with dementia are more appropriate for institutional settings, like memory care or skilled nursing, because they focus on how to manage the person with dementia, not how to live life with the person with dementia. And they're totally different. I'll never forget when I was moderating a support group for family caregivers, when someone shouted, "If one more person tells me to take time for myself, take a bath, or go get a massage, I'm going to scream. It's natural for our relationship with our parents to change as they get older. But getting comfortable with my parents aging was never my issue because I grew up loving older people, their stories, their faces, even their hands. I had even decided to make it my life's work after volunteering at a dementia day program as a teen. That's me in the early 90s with a woman with dementia. Since then, we have learned so much about this disease, but we are still learning. We do know that by 2060, 1 in 9 people over the age of 65 will have dementia. That's 13.8 million Americans. Just blink twice, and another person has it. So that means if this disease has not already affected your family, chances are it will. So what do? As an expert, I needed to figure out how to incorporate all of my exposure and training that I'd had, including reminding myself over and over to separate the disease from the person. As a daughter, I needed to figure out a new relationship with this version of my dad. So, at year 6 or 7 of his disease, I made a very conscious decision to use this stage of his dementia as an opportunity to experiment on our new situation. On me, my dad, unfortunately, and my family. I needed to figure out how to make it better for all of us. That's when I decided to create a new place. A place with no judgment or stigma, a place where we could thrive the way we were in that moment. A place where we could find common ground, where my dad could find purpose, and me as the caregiver could feel authentic and fulfilled. So you guys want to hear what we did? Well, my dad and I, decided to start a company, producing and selling felted wool dryer balls. Yes, you guys heard me correctly. Wool dryer balls. This appealed to my dad's sense of being a businessman and helped to keep him occupied. Dad managed production. My role was to sell product. And then him and I would work together to source the wool yarn via internet searches and day trips to discount stores. Then my dad would source the wool, would spool the yarn while sitting in his chair. Then he would prepare all of it for the washer. Mom was quality control, and I came by each day to ensure quotas were met and take away product for sale. For 6 months, my dad and I worked on our company. He would ask me how sales were going, and I would tease him about quality of product. While Dryer Ball Inc. was not a reality in either of our worlds, it was a place we met every day. It allowed us to connect beyond the day-to-day challenges of living with dementia and gave us something to do together that wasn't blanketed in the disease. Another example was our monthly family finance meetings. I had taken over many of my dad's previous responsibilities, and he wanted to ensure that I was doing everything right. So every month, I would prepare a balance sheet of income and expenses that we would review together. While my dad struggled to read the documents and grasp some of the concepts, we would still engage in discussions. On many occasions, the papers would go missing, or he would accuse me of not providing them. I actually recall a time when we were meeting, and he referred to me as the worst CFO he had ever had. I smiled and replied, "Dad, your pay and benefits are terrible." But him and I continued to meet, and these monthly meetings made him still feel like he was in control. During my parents' 53 years of marriage, my mom would provide my dad with a honey-do list. My dad loved to do projects around the house for my mom. So when the time came when we needed more support in the home, Rather than hiring an aide, we hired a handyman. Each week, Mitchell would arrive for him and my dad to tackle my mom's list. They would hang pictures, fix sprinklers, refill bird feeders, and change light bulbs. This weekly appointment allowed for my dad to still feel like the helpful husband who was needed around the house, even if the most helpful thing he did that day was hold a light bulb for Mitchell. Each of these examples is unique to my dad. And I know not everyone will bond over entrepreneurship, spreadsheets, or home improvement. But this worked for us, and that's the point. Maybe for you, it's about opening an art gallery, or starting a garage band, or compiling a cookbook. It's about finding that thing that works for you and your family. I know that caring for somebody with dementia is hard from a personal and professional perspective. But if we professionals, caregivers, and loved ones stop for a moment, slow down, and truly listen, we can connect differently. Not only did this change how I thought about dementia, this changed my relationship with my dad. We were truly connecting beyond the dementia. And this dad showed me a different one than the one I grew up with. This dad said he loved me. He hugged me and kissed me. We fought, but never stayed mad. This is the man I genuinely believe always existed and will be the man I will never forget. Thank you.